boy finds an abandoned baby girl on the road and calls 911. When the police arrive, they discover a terrifying truth. Lucas Henderson squinted through the windshield as he steered his aging Chevrolet down Winchester Road. It was his usual route back from Annie's Diner, the small eatery where he worked late shifts to save up for college, but tonight felt different. The dense October fog clung to the asphalt, swallowing most of the headlights' glow. The wind was chilly, and the skeletal silhouettes of trees on either side of the road rattled like bones in the darkness. It was nearly midnight, and he wanted nothing more than to collapse into bed when he finally got home. He was halfway through absent-mindedly humming a tune from the diner's jukebox when something on the shoulder of the road caught his eye. At first, he thought it might be a stray cat or a chunk of debris, but as he drove closer, the shape resolved into something terrifyingly human. In the next breath, his foot slammed on the brakes. Heart pounding, Lucas rolled down the window just enough to peer out. The frigid air slapped him in the face, raising goosebumps on his arms. The moonlight, hazy through the fog, illuminated a small, motionless form wrapped in what looked like a hospital-issue blanket. It was so incongruous that, for a few seconds, Lucas couldn't make sense of what he was seeing. He opened the car door and hurried toward the shape. As he leaned over, he heard the faintest of cries, a whimper that made his stomach clench with alarm. He reached out with trembling hands and discovered, to his utter shock, that it was a baby. He could see now it was a little girl, was alive but shivering badly. Tears stained her cheeks, and her tiny fists quivered as she let out another broken wail. "Oh God," Lucas whispered, trying not to panic. Hey, it's okay," he soothed, though he had no idea what he was doing. He wasn't even sure how to hold a baby, let alone one he just found abandoned on the side of a road. Carefully, he gathered her into his arms, pressing her close to his chest to give her warmth. He could feel the rapid flutter of her heartbeat. "You're okay," he repeated, more to convince himself than the child. He hurried back to his car, setting her gently on the passenger seat. His mind whirred. He had to call 911 immediately, but first, he removed his light jacket and wrapped it around the baby, hoping the additional layer would keep her from freezing in the night air. Once she was tucked in, he fumbled for his phone. The 911 operator answered with a calm, "911, what's your emergency?" Hi," Lucas began, the words jamming in his throat. "I just found a baby on the side of Winchester Road near the old sawmill. She's freezing. I need help." The dispatcher's questions came at him rapidly. Could he describe the infant's condition? Did she appear injured? Was he able to stay at the scene until help arrived? Lucas tried his best to convey everything. His voice shook, but he answered clearly. "She's alive," he whispered, looking at the baby's face. Her eyes were half open, as though she was too exhausted to cry anymore. "She's cold, but I don't see any major injuries. And yes, I'll stay right here. Please hurry." After he hung up, time seemed to crawl. Each minute felt like an hour. The baby stirred and let out a soft whimper, her tiny limbs making jerky motions as though protesting her situation. Lucas's heart twisted. He felt a surge of protectiveness for this little girl he didn't even know. He wondered who would abandon an infant in the middle of nowhere. Was the mother in danger? Was this a horrible mistake? Questions tumbled through his mind. He tried to recall if he had seen any other cars on the road, but the thick fog and his own exhaustion made it nearly impossible to remember. At last, the wail of sirens cut through the silence. Red and blue lights pierced the night. 2 patrol cars pulled up, followed by an unmarked sedan. Uniformed officers stepped out first, their boots crunching against gravel. A tall woman in her late 30s, wearing a detective's badge around her neck, strode purposefully toward him. Detective Sarah Martinez, her nameplate read. Lucas emerged from the car carefully, the baby still cradled against his chest. His heart pounded at the sight of the police, but relief coursed through him just as strongly. An EMT rushed over with a thermal blanket. Lucas passed the infant into the paramedic's gentle hands, trying not to let the anxiety overtake him. "I'm Detective Martinez," the woman said, her sharp gaze sweeping over Lucas. And you are? Lucas Henderson, he managed. I work at Annie's Diner. I was just driving home. Detective Martinez nodded, glancing at the baby being examined by the paramedic. You found her on the side of the road? Yes, wrapped in that blanket. She was freezing. Martinez exchanged a meaningful look with her partner, Detective Brian Fisher, who was now kneeling by the shoulder of the road, scanning for any clues. Lucas could see Fisher's flashlight beam flicker across the asphalt, searching for tire tracks, footprints, anything that might explain how this baby ended up here. All right, Lucas. I'm going to need to ask you some questions, Martinez said, her voice all business. She handed him a thin notepad. For now, just write down your contact information and anything else you think might be relevant. Like the exact time you found her, what you saw, any cars you might have passed. Lucas nodded, his hands trembling slightly as he took the notepad. In the distance, the baby began to cry more robustly, her lungs sounding stronger now that she was warming up. A wave of relief mingled with sorrow washed over him. Whoever she was, at least she was alive and receiving proper care now. After answering the initial barrage of questions, Lucas glanced over at the paramedics carrying the baby into an ambulance. Detective Martinez observed him quietly, an almost empathetic light in her eyes. We'll get her to the hospital, Martinez said, softer than before. She'll be safe. Thank you for calling 911 and staying with her. Lucas swallowed hard and nodded. He lingered, though he wasn't sure why. Something inside him felt like it was being stretched, a tug of responsibility toward this tiny life that he'd stumbled upon. Finally, after the ambulance doors closed and the sirens faded into the fog, Detective Martinez placed a hand on Lucas's shoulder. Go home, she urged gently. Get some rest. We'll keep in touch if we need more information. The swirl of lights, the hum of police chatter, and the crisp air felt surreal as Lucas watched the remaining patrol car drive away. Detective Martinez and her partner lingered last, collecting whatever they could from the scene. Lucas climbed into his car, numb from the night's events. As he started the engine, he shot one final look at the spot where he'd discovered the baby. It was now empty, save for his footprints and the faint outline of her small shape etched into the gravel. Lucas exhaled shakily, feeling like he had just crossed a boundary between an ordinary life and something else, something far darker and more complex. Little did he know, this single act of compassion would ripple out in ways he never could have imagined. The next morning, Lucas woke with a jolt of anxiety in his chest. He'd fallen asleep in his clothes, phone still clutched in his hand in case the police called. Outside, the sky was a cold gray, matching the unease that still lingered from the night before. The baby's faint cries echoed in his mind, and he felt a pang of guilt for sleeping at all. After guzzling a quick cup of coffee, he headed straight to Millbrook General Hospital. He told himself he was just going to make sure the baby was all right, but deep down, he knew there was more to it. The sense of responsibility that had overtaken him on Winchester Road hadn't let go. When he arrived, the hospital's neon sign blinked wearily, and the glass doors whooshed open, unleashing a blast of sterile-smelling air. Lucas approached the reception desk, feeling awkward as he asked about the baby, who might have been admitted the previous night. After some confusion and a flurry of phone calls, he was directed to the pediatric ward. An older nurse with kind eyes noticed him hovering in the hallway. "Can I help you, young man?" she asked. Yeah," Lucas said, wringing his hands. "I found a baby last night, abandoned. She was brought in. I'm, Lucas Henderson." Her features softened in recognition. "Oh, you're the one who called 911. Well, thank you for that. She's doing better. The doctors say she's stable now. We're still running tests. Is she? Can I see her?" He felt ridiculous even asking, but he couldn't leave without knowing. The nurse hesitated, then nodded. "Let me check with the pediatrician. Wait here for a moment." Lucas paced, noticing the antiseptic smell, the scuffed linoleum floors, and the distant hum of medical equipment. A part of him wanted to run away. This wasn't his baby, after all. He had no obligation to be here, but something heavier, stronger, compelled him to stay. Meanwhile, across town, Detective Sarah Martinez was already at her desk in the Millbrook Police Department. The baby's case had drawn her in like a magnet. There was something off about the details, especially the blanket. It was stamped with the logo of Millbrook General Hospital, but in a style she recognized from an older supply batch that had been reported missing months ago. The disappearance of blankets might have seemed trivial at first, but Martinez knew better. Hospitals kept meticulous inventory, and theft of even small supplies often signaled something bigger. She flipped through her notes, recalling that Millbrook General had reported a series of minor thefts in the past year. Blankets, surgical gloves, syringes, and an oddly specific set of NICU equipment. The hospital's security was old-fashioned. Cameras often malfunctioned or footage was too grainy to be much help. Nonetheless, Martinez had flagged these incidents in the department's database, noticing that neighboring towns reported similar thefts. The scale was unusual but lacked a unifying lead until now. When her partner, Detective Brian Fisher, walked in with 2 cups of coffee, she gestured at the screen. The stolen blanket might connect to all those missing supplies from the hospital. I want to look deeper. Fisher blew on his coffee. So we're investigating an abandoned baby. Tragic, but not unprecedented. And linking it to hospital thefts. Seems like a stretch, but you've been right before. Martinez shrugged. It's a hunch, but I'd rather chase it than let it go. We can't ignore that blanket. Someone involved in these thefts may have had access to that baby. Perhaps the mother was a patient at some point. Or maybe the mother or father stole these supplies. By mid-afternoon, Martinez had put in a request for the hospital's logs over the past few months. She also wanted any surveillance from the roads near Winchester, though the fog and remote area made it unlikely they'd find good footage. Meanwhile, she tried to find out if there were any similar cases in the surrounding counties. Infants abandoned with hospital paraphernalia. Back at the hospital, the pediatric ward staff finally allowed Lucas a brief visit. He found the baby in a small crib, connected to a few monitors that displayed reassuring lines and numbers. She was still tiny, swaddled in a fresh blanket that was definitely not hospital issue. The nurse from earlier stood beside him. She doesn't have a name yet, the nurse said softly, looking down at the baby. We've just been calling her Baby Doe for now. Lucas's chest tightened. A wave of emotion crashed over him. He'd never felt something so protective for someone he'd just met. He gently touched the back of her tiny hand, and to his surprise, her fingers curled around his. The contact felt electrifying, as though forging a bond he never asked for but couldn't deny. How long will she be here? He asked quietly. We don't know. Child Protective Services will likely get involved, trying to place her in foster care if no relatives come forward. But that can be a process. As Lucas gazed at the infant's sleeping face, Detective Martinez's words from the night before replayed in his mind. She'll be safe. He silently prayed that was true. He gave the nurse a polite smile, thanked her, and slipped away, heading back to the lobby with a mix of relief and sadness. Outside, the sky was heavy with clouds, threatening rain. Lucas felt like he was walking in a fog of his own, memories of the previous night colliding with the stark reality of this hospital. He was too lost in thought to notice Detective Martinez approaching from the opposite direction until she called his name. Lucas, she said, an almost friendly warmth in her voice. You came to see the baby? He nodded, suddenly self-conscious. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure she was okay. Martinez studied him for a moment, then gave a thoughtful nod. I appreciate your concern. Do you mind if we talk for a bit? Lucas led her to a small waiting area near the entrance. They sat on plastic chairs beneath a painting of a pastoral landscape, an odd contrast to the antiseptic gloom of the hospital. Martinez pulled out a small notebook and pen. We're still looking into the circumstances, she began, and it might help if we had a clearer timeline of your night. You said you left Annie's diner around what time? Around 11:30, Lucas said. But it was closer to midnight when I found her. The road was empty, or at least I didn't see any cars. Just a lot of fog. Martinez jotted down notes. Thank you. Any idea where that blanket came from? Did you notice any unusual markings? Or anything that might indicate it was older, or from a specific unit in the hospital. Lucas shook his head. No, sorry. I just noticed the hospital's logo. That was it. She tapped her pen against the pad. All right. We'll keep you updated if we find anything significant. Lucas stood, unsure if he was supposed to leave. I have to get to class soon, he said, remembering that he was still in high school, that life was still going on outside this bizarre event. Martinez gave him a half-smile. Of course. Just know we might call you again. You found her, so you're part of this, at least in some ways. A few moments later, Lucas was out in the chilly air once more, trudging toward his car. He felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders again. Part of him wanted to escape it. He was just a kid, after all. But another part, perhaps the bigger part, couldn't ignore the urge to protect that baby. Meanwhile, Detective Martinez made her way back into the hospital, heading straight to administration. She needed to verify the blanket serial number, confirm exactly which batch it belonged to. If it matched the stolen items, that would be the first piece of tangible evidence to tie this baby's case to something bigger. By the end of the day, Martinez had her answer. The blanket serial number corresponded to items that had disappeared from the hospital 6 weeks ago. Another hospital in a nearby town had reported an identical theft 2 weeks later. The puzzle pieces were slowly aligning, forming a pattern in the fog, one that hinted at something far more sinister than a single abandoned infant. Classes the next day were a blur for Lucas. He'd arrived at school feeling disconnected, as if his life had diverged from his peers overnight. While they fretted about homework and homecoming, his mind was full of crying infants and hospital corridors. During a free period, Lucas found himself in the school library, scrolling through local news websites on one of the old desktop computers. He was searching for updates on the abandoned baby but found only a brief article summarizing the event. No new details about possible suspects or the baby's condition. Just a statement from the police, praising an anonymous teenager for calling 911. As he skimmed through related articles, a familiar face flashed in his mind. Emma. She had been his closest friend until 8 months ago, when she vanished without a trace. The local news outlets had run stories for a week, but the buzz quickly faded when no leads materialized. The police speculated she might have run away, but Lucas never believed that. Emma was shy, studious, with no history of trouble at home. Her disappearance had hit him hard, and his life had never felt quite right since. Now, for some inexplicable reason, the baby's case brought Emma's memory flooding back. The night Emma disappeared had been foggy, too, and Lucas couldn't shake the eerie feeling that the two events were linked in some cosmic sense. It was irrational, but the thought lodged in his mind like a thorn. After school, he headed home, intent on dropping his backpack and then visiting the hospital once more, just to see if there were any developments. But as he stepped into his small living room, where his mother was folding laundry, she gave him a look that said she'd heard something. Detective Martinez called, she said before Lucas could even set his backpack down. She wants you to come by the station tomorrow after school. Says it's just routine follow-up. Lucas's stomach fluttered. He nodded and mumbled a thank you before heading to his room. Slipping out of the house minutes later, he trudged toward the hospital on foot, since it wasn't too far away. Meanwhile, Detective Martinez sat at her cluttered desk, poring over old case files. One of her colleagues had mentioned a missing teen, Emma Roberts, from about 8 months back. Martinez vaguely remembered the case. It was widely believed Emma had left town voluntarily, but the official investigation had never closed. Now, as Martinez flipped through the thin file, she wondered if there could be a connection. She didn't have any concrete evidence, but her intuition told her to re-examine the details. Emma had been a high-achieving student, with no known conflicts at home. She disappeared on a Wednesday night after leaving her part-time job at a local coffee shop. Security cameras in the parking lot were broken at the time, so there was no footage. No sightings, no ransom calls, nothing. Martinez frowned at how abruptly the investigation seemed to have reached a dead end. Lucas arrived at the hospital and headed toward the pediatric ward. A new nurse, a younger man in scrubs, greeted him. Lucas explained who he was, adding that Detective Martinez was aware he was checking in. The nurse nodded but said the baby was sleeping. Lucas was grateful just to know she was safe. He lingered a moment, then turned to leave. That was when he spotted a figure at the end of the hallway. Detective Martinez herself, flipping through her phone. She looked up, spotted him, and gestured for him to come over. "Lucas," she greeted. "Seems we keep bumping into each other." "Yeah, I guess I just wanted to make sure she's still doing okay," Lucas said, feeling mildly self-conscious. "She's doing fine. CPS has been alerted, and a social worker will likely assess her situation soon." Martinez studied him. "I also wanted to ask, you knew a girl named Emma Roberts, right?" Lucas felt his heart skip a beat. "Yes, she was my best friend." "Why?" "I'm reviewing her case file. There's something about the pattern of missing people in this area. Mostly adults, but Emma stood out. I'd like to talk to you about her at the station." "Sure," he said quietly, a lump forming in his throat. "Anything that can help." Martinez nodded. "You might remember details others overlooked. Sometimes things come to light after time has passed." Lucas swallowed hard and forced a small, hopeful smile. "I'll do my best." Shortly after, Lucas left the hospital. His thoughts a chaotic jumble of images. Emma's warm smile, the baby's tiny fists, the hospital's glaring fluorescent lights. The mental connection between Emma's disappearance and the baby was growing stronger, though he couldn't articulate why. It felt like the two were tethered in his mind, leading him somewhere he couldn't yet see. The following day after school, Lucas made his way to the police station. He was directed to a small interview room where Martinez waited, her partner Detective Fisher seated beside her. They offered him water and asked if he was comfortable. "We'll keep this informal," Martinez said, "but we are recording." Lucas nodded, pushing aside nerves. He told them about Emma, how they'd been friends since childhood, how she loved reading fantasy novels and wanted to study journalism someday. He recounted the last conversation they had. She seemed stressed but wouldn't say why. A rush of guilt flared up again, remembering how he'd shrugged off her anxiety, assuming it was just school stress. "You said she was stressed," Martinez prompted. "Did she mention feeling threatened or followed?" "No," Lucas replied, voice tight with regret. "But I remember her asking weird questions about traveling. Like how easy was it to get a fake ID, how to get bus tickets without leaving a paper trail. I thought she was joking or doing research for a story." Fisher exchanged a look with Martinez. "Could be indicative of her planning to run away, but it's not definitive." "Do you recall if she knew anyone in the medical field? Maybe someone who worked in a hospital or clinic?" Lucas hesitated, searching his memory. "Not that I remember. Her dad was a mechanic. Her mom worked in real estate." Martinez scribbled notes, her forehead creased. "We'll keep digging." "Thanks, Lucas. One more thing. Do you recall Emma mentioning anything about missing people or shady clinics?" "Shady clinics?" Lucas's eyebrows shot up. "No, that would have stuck out." "Why?" Fisher cleared his throat. "We're looking at a pattern of missing individuals that might be linked to medical supply theft. The details are still fuzzy, but we suspect there's a network operating under the guise of legitimate healthcare." Lucas's pulse quickened. "And you think Emma might have been involved or a victim?" "It's possible," Martinez said carefully. "We won't know until we investigate further." Stepping out of the station, Lucas felt a mixture of renewed hope and gut-churning dread. Could Emma be alive, caught in some terrible situation? The idea was horrifying, yet it was better than believing she was simply gone forever. That evening, as he sat on the edge of his bed, Lucas replayed every memory he had of Emma. The laughter they shared, the small arguments, the confessions, and the times she'd seemed lost in thought. He remembered the day she disappeared. She'd sent him a text that read, "I need to talk to you soon." But he'd been busy at work and never replied in time. That failure still ate at him. Little did he know that Detective Martinez was connecting Emma's story to the mysterious baby in ways that would turn both investigations on their heads. The abandoned child on Winchester Road was more than just a tragic discovery. She was the first real clue to unraveling a dangerous operation that had claimed victims, including, possibly, Emma. Over the next 2 weeks, Detective Martinez's inquiries bore fruit. She and Fisher uncovered an unsettling pattern. A string of disappearances, mostly of vulnerable women, in towns stretching across state lines. Each town also reported missing hospital supplies, mostly small-scale but suspiciously targeted, items used in neonatal care, obstetrics, and certain surgeries. As Martinez compiled the data, she realized these weren't random thefts. They seemed orchestrated. A shadowy network was operating under the facade of a legitimate medical supply company, funneling stolen goods to clandestine clinics. The clinics, in turn, were rumored to provide unregulated procedures, everything from illegal organ transplants to forced surrogacies and trafficking. The baby on Winchester Road was a stark testament to the ring's brutality. If an infant was inconvenient or threatened to expose them, they'd discard her without hesitation. This was no small-time operation. Martinez looped in state authorities, who then brought in the FBI. The case ballooned overnight, leaving Martinez and Fisher in the middle, feeling both validated and overwhelmed. Lucas, for his part, heard snippets of news from Martinez, but most details were understandably withheld. Still, he couldn't quell his growing obsession with finding out more. Buoyed by a mix of concern for Emma and guilt over not noticing signs sooner, Lucas began to do some amateur sleuthing of his own. He was no detective, but he had something Martinez didn't: intimate knowledge of the town's quirks, rumors, and networks of gossip. Working at Annie's Diner allowed him to overhear conversations between truckers, travelers, and locals. People felt comfortable opening up over a plate of waffles, and Lucas listened closely. One evening, a regular named Chris, a truck driver who spent long hours on the interstate, mentioned seeing suspicious activity at a nearby warehouse, supposedly owned by a company specializing in hospital equipment distribution. Chris saw vans coming in late at night, lights off, and occasionally glimpsed people who looked frightened, as though they were being herded. He tried to report it once, but local authorities brushed him off. Lucas's heart pounded as he jotted down the address: a deserted stretch off Route 22. When Lucas shared this tip with Martinez, she was intrigued. She ran the warehouse address through the department's records and discovered multiple shell companies connected to it, all traced back to a chain of medical supply businesses with ambiguous leadership. To fit the pattern, the FBI set up surveillance, hoping to catch a break. Meanwhile, the evidence pointed to a network that spanned multiple states, smuggling not just stolen supplies but human beings. Some victims were coerced, others abducted, some lured with false promises of employment. The presence of a baby in the mix suggested forced pregnancies or surrogacy gone horribly wrong. Martinez felt sick just imagining the possibilities, but she forced herself to remain detached enough to do her job. Lucas found himself more entangled than ever. Every time he lay in bed, images of the baby's tiny face blended with memories of Emma. He kept going to the hospital, checking on the infant, still called Baby Doe. He even caught a glimpse of a tearful young woman escorted by officers one afternoon, but no one would tell him if she was related to the case. In the swirl of activity, Martinez caught a break. A woman named Maya turned up at a nearby shelter, terrified and malnourished, claiming she'd escaped from an illegal clinic. The shelter staff alerted the police, and Martinez was the first to interview her. Maya's words spilled out, revealing a harrowing story of abduction, confinement, and forced medical procedures. Though still too frightened to share every detail, Maya's account confirmed the existence of an organized ring that used front companies to move women around, isolating them from any outside help. Some were pregnant against their will. Others were exploited for cheap labor in makeshift clinics. Maya said she'd escaped only after a guard got careless, leaving a door unlatched. When Martinez showed Maya a photo of the abandoned baby from Winchester Road, tears stained the woman's face. She couldn't be sure, but she suspected the baby belonged to a fellow captive who'd recently tried to flee. The attempt apparently failed, and rumors spread that the baby had been taken away. Maya's horror deepened when she realized the child might have been simply tossed aside to cover the group's tracks. As this new witness came forward, Martinez and Fisher's phones buzzed nonstop. The FBI was ramping up plans for a multi-location sting, aiming to shut down the clinics and arrest the ringleaders. But the scope was massive and they needed airtight intel to move. Meanwhile, Lucas was oblivious to the operational details but sensed the rising tension. When he turned up for his next shift at the diner, the local gossip was all about some big police operation rumored to be happening at the outskirts of town. Everyone smelled something big going down, but no one had the full story. During a brief lull, Lucas texted Martinez, "Heard about a possible raid. Is it connected to the baby?" She replied cryptically, "We're on the trail. Will update when I can." Though it was frustrating, Lucas had to trust the professionals. Yet, he couldn't help continuing his own quiet investigation. The trucker Chris talked about the shady warehouse again, and Lucas gleaned that there might be more than one location. He'd seen trucks bearing the same company logo at a different site near the interstate truck stop. The next day, Lucas made a risky decision. He drove out there after his shift, hoping to see something that could help the police. The gravel parking lot of the truck stop was dimly lit by a few flickering neon signs. Lucas parked his Chevy as inconspicuously as possible and walked around, trying not to look suspicious. He spotted the logo, a stylized caduceus, on the side of a long white trailer. Two men were unloading crates into a smaller van. Lucas crept closer behind a chain-link fence, phone in hand, camera ready. He zoomed in, snapping pictures of the license plate. Then he noticed one of the crates tipping slightly open. It wasn't just random supplies. He caught a glimpse of medical devices, some still with the hospital's insignia. His heart thudded. This was concrete evidence. Suddenly, one of the men whipped around, spotting Lucas's silhouette against the headlights of a passing truck. Lucas's stomach dropped. Before he could blink, the man barked, "Hey, who's there?" Lucas bolted, his heart hammering as he sprinted back to his car. He leapt in, started the engine, and sped away, cursing himself for being reckless. But at least he had the photos. He sent them to Martinez that night, trembling with adrenaline and fear. She replied almost instantly, "Get home safe. Thank you. This could be huge." Lucas sighed in relief, though the sight of those crates haunted him. He couldn't shake the gut feeling that Emma might be hidden in some facility under the watch of these men. Martinez was both alarmed and impressed by Lucas's initiative. The photos confirmed the group was moving stolen medical supplies, potentially preparing to relocate or expand their illegal clinics. Time was running out. If they didn't strike soon, the ring might vanish, leaving countless victims, including Emma, lost forever. By the end of that week, Martinez, Fisher, and their FBI counterparts formed a plan. Simultaneous raids would be conducted on multiple sites, including the warehouse off Route 22 and a few other suspected locations. They had to move swiftly and coordinate carefully to save as many victims as possible and trap the ringleaders before they could scatter. Unbeknownst to Lucas, his amateur sleuthing had provided the final key piece of intel needed to locate the main facility. Emma's disappearance, the stolen supplies, the abandoned baby, Maya's testimony. All these threads converged in a single, chilling conclusion: an underground network trafficking in human lives, right under their noses. And now they were on the brink of bringing it all down. While final preparations for the raids took shape, Detective Martinez spent hours interviewing Maya, the escaped captive. Each new detail was more harrowing than the last, shedding light on what truly went on behind the closed doors of these illegal clinics. Maya described a nondescript facility tucked away in the countryside. On the outside, it looked like an abandoned factory. Inside, it was a makeshift medical center, separated into different wings. She'd been taken there against her will, initially drugged during the abduction. When she woke, she found herself in a cramped dormitory-style room with other frightened women, most of them pregnant or showing signs of recent childbirth. "They told us we owed money," Maya explained, voice trembling. "They'd pretend it was a debt for medical procedures or transportation or forged documents. But it was just an excuse to keep us there. We were locked in. Some tried to escape and were punished. I saw guards. They had guns." As she recalled the trauma, Maya's eyes flickered with haunted memories. Martinez could tell the woman was desperate for justice but also plagued by guilt for those she left behind. Maya recounted the day one of the pregnant women went into premature labor. The clinic staff, untrained and indifferent, botched the delivery. The baby was whisked away, and Maya never learned if it survived. She choked on her words. I'm not proud of running and leaving others behind, but her voice quavered. I had a chance, and I took it. Martinez reached across the table, placing a gentle hand on Maya's. You survived, and now you're helping us save them. Never apologize for that. Maya nodded, tears falling. Thank you. When Martinez finally showed Maya the photo of baby Doe for the second time, Maya studied the infant's face for a long moment. I can't say for certain, she whispered, but she looks like the baby of a woman named Alicia. Alicia tried to flee in the middle of the night. She was caught, but the baby wasn't. Then I heard rumors the baby had been abandoned. They do that sometimes. If a child is inconvenient or if it threatens to expose them, horror twisted Martinez's gut. She took a steadying breath. Maya, have you heard of Emma Roberts? A teen who disappeared about 8 months ago. Maya frowned, thinking hard. The name sounds familiar. I think I remember a younger girl. She said she was 17. Is that her? Martinez's chest tightened. Possibly. She was terrified. Maya continued, voice soft. They kept saying she was valuable. Something about surrogacy. She trailed off, guilt in her eyes. Martinez's hope soared. Emma might still be alive. The weight of responsibility to rescue her and the others felt heavier than ever. Meanwhile, Lucas had no direct knowledge of Maya's story. Still, his intuition told him that Emma, if she was indeed caught in this nightmare, was somehow tied to that baby's fate. Each time he thought of Emma's bright eyes and shy grin, he felt a pang of both guilt and motivation. He confided in his mother about the possibility that Emma was mixed up in something horrible. She was alarmed to hear her son's suspicions, but also proud of his determination. She made Lucas promise to stay safe, reminding him that it was the police's job to handle such matters. Lucas nodded, but he couldn't shake his determination to do whatever he could, however small. Over the next few days, the tension around town was palpable. The police presence was subtly ramping up, unmarked vehicles patrolling areas near the suspected clinics. The local rumor mill churned, but no one knew exactly what was about to happen. The Ring, for its part, seemed unaware of how thoroughly they'd been infiltrated. Every time Martinez received a new snippet of intel, be it from Maya, hospital records, or Lucas's photos, she fed it into a central repository managed by the FBI. The big question: where exactly were they holding the women? From Maya's descriptions, the main facility was remote, surrounded by farmland or woodlands, but the region was dotted with old factories, mines, and warehouses. Without a precise location, they risked missing their target or tipping off the traffickers. Then fate intervened. A patrol officer responding to a random tip about suspicious noises in an abandoned factory recognized the sign of forced entry. He found broken locks, faint footprints, and leftover scraps of medical packaging. It matched the items Lucas had photographed at the truck stop. The address was shared with Martinez, who showed it to Maya. She confirmed it looked like the place she'd escaped from, though the traffickers might have changed some details. Martinez felt her pulse race. This was it. They had the location. A wave of urgency coursed through her veins. She wanted to go that very second. But the FBI insisted on a coordinated effort. They needed to secure all the sites simultaneously to prevent warnings from traveling between them. Maya agreed to guide them, describing the interior layout as best she could. When the day finally came, the plan was set. Law enforcement would hit multiple facilities at once, some in state, some out of state. Maya's main target was the one suspected to house the women, including Emma. It would be a high-risk operation, but the reward was immeasurable. The chance to save dozens of lives. In a motel room near the edge of town, half a dozen plainclothes officers and FBI agents laid out weapons, vests, and tactical gear. Maps were taped to the walls, dotted with red circles marking each raid location. Martinez and Fisher stood to one side, conferring with the FBI lead. Maya sat on the bed, fidgeting, giving a final rundown of the floor plan as best she remembered it. She'd repeated it so many times her voice was hoarse, but she powered through, determined. Nightfall found them in a convoy of unmarked SUVs, headlights slicing through the darkness. As they approached the abandoned factory, the tension thickened like fog. A hush fell over everyone as they geared up. Bulletproof vests strapped tight, guns checked, flashlights at the ready. In the distance, Martinez could see other teams encircling the perimeter, cutting off escape routes. The signal came over the radio. Simultaneous operations across multiple sites were commencing. Martinez gave Maya's hand a reassuring squeeze, then motioned her to stay put with an officer who would ensure her safety. Martinez and Fisher would lead the infiltration team. They advanced, hugging the shadows, hearts pounding with the knowledge that at any second, someone inside might sound the alarm. Inside the factory, a single light glowed through a high window. The metal doors looked rusted shut, but Martinez knew from Maya's testimony that they had a back entrance. The team found it, pried it open silently. Once inside, they spread out, every footstep echoing. The place smelled of stale air, old grease, and a faint tang of bleach. As they pressed deeper into the corridors, the truth of Maya's story became undeniable. They passed a makeshift infirmary where stolen medical supplies were piled haphazardly. Flickering fluorescent lights revealed gurneys with restraints attached, soiled blankets, and half-empty 4 bags. A wave of revulsion twisted Martinez's stomach, but she pressed on. Suddenly, muffled cries echoed from behind a locked metal door. The team moved swiftly. Martinez hammered a bolt cutter against the lock, and Fisher yanked the door open. Inside, several women huddled in the corner, eyes wide with terror. One was heavily pregnant. Others were clutching each other, tears streaming down their cheeks. The officers swiftly ushered them out, whispering reassurances. Another set of doors revealed more women, all malnourished, some sickly. The horrific reality of the trafficking ring was laid bare. Martinez searched every face, her heart thudding. Then, in a back corner, she saw someone who made her breath catch. A girl with disheveled brown hair, curled up on a cot, barely conscious. She was younger than the others, her cheeks sunken. Could it be? Martinez called out gently, "Emma Roberts?" The girl looked up, eyes bleary. She didn't speak, but a glimmer of recognition sparked. Martinez rushed to her, helping her stand. She was frail, trembling. Martinez's voice shook with relief as she radioed, "We've found Emma. I repeat, we have Emma Roberts." Amidst the flurry of rescue, the traffickers realized their fortress had been breached. Gunshots echoed from another section of the facility. Officers took cover, returning fire. Martinez shielded Emma, leading her toward the exit. Fisher and the SWAT team advanced, subduing the armed guards in a chaotic firefight that left bullet casings strewn across the concrete floor. Eventually, the gunfire subsided. The ring members still on site were either arrested or fled, though the perimeter teams caught many trying to escape. One of the suspected ringleaders, a tall man with a scar over his eyebrow, was apprehended after a brief chase. More arrests flooded in from the other raid sites. The entire operation, though tense and dangerous, was a success. Maya, safe in the SUV with her escort, watched tearfully as the first rescued women emerged. Relief and guilt warred inside her. She'd escaped alone, but now these women, her sisters in captivity, were free too. She hoped the same was true for Alicia, the mother of baby Doe. Emma was rushed to a waiting ambulance, Martinez by her side. The detective's heart ached at the sight of the teen's condition. But Emma was alive, and soon she'd be reunited with her family. That single victory felt like a triumph against the darkness that had threatened to consume them all. In the aftermath of the raid, chaos and relief collided. Sirens blared, radios crackled, and the once-abandoned factory was now teeming with law enforcement. Ambulances lined up outside, each one whisking survivors away for immediate medical care. The scale of the operation was enormous. Dozens of captives freed, a handful of clinic staff taken into custody, and leads on even more locations in neighboring states. Lucas, clueless about the precise timing, was at home when his phone buzzed late at night. It was Detective Martinez, sounding elated and exhausted. "We got them," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "We found Emma." She's alive. Lucas almost dropped his phone. A wave of relief so overwhelming washed over him that his legs nearly gave out. What? Where? How is she okay? She's weak, malnourished, but she's safe now. We're taking her to Millbrook General. You can see her soon. Tears pricked Lucas's eyes. He mumbled a shaky, "Thank you," before hanging up, then rushed to tell his mother. Within minutes, they were in the car, driving through the dark streets to the hospital. The neon sign flickered as always, but tonight it felt like a beacon of hope. They found Detective Martinez in the ER waiting area. She looked exhausted, her hair a mess, and her clothes smudged with dust. But she wore a triumphant smile. Emma's with the doctors now. They're running tests. She's stable enough for visitors shortly. Lucas's mother wrapped Martinez in a grateful hug, tears of relief streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for bringing her home." A few minutes later, Lucas was allowed into Emma's room. She lay there, and four in her arm, eyes closed. The harsh fluorescent lights revealed cuts and bruises on her arms. Her once bright hair now dull and knotted. But the steady beep of the heart monitor was a rhythm of life. When she opened her eyes and saw Lucas, her parched lips curved into a ghost of a smile. "Hey, Emma," he whispered, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. "You're safe." She blinked, tears forming. In a raspy voice, she managed, "You found me?" Lucas shook his head. "Detective Martinez and the FBI did. I helped in small ways, took some pictures, gave them some leads." "You did enough," she whispered, gripping his hand with surprising strength. "Thank you." Her gaze flickered, searching his face. She seemed to want to say more but lacked the energy. A nurse appeared, gently reminding Lucas to keep the visit short. He nodded and promised Emma he'd be back soon. Outside in the corridor, the swirl of relief was interwoven with heartbreak for the many other victims. Some were in worse shape than Emma, others too traumatized to speak. Among them was Alicia, the mother of baby Doe, discovered in a separate section of the facility. She was hysterical at first, believing her baby lost or dead. But Detective Martinez was all too ready to give her the joyous news that her daughter was alive, healthy, and waiting at Millbrook General. The hospital staff quickly arranged a private space where Alicia, once medically cleared, could be reunited with her baby. She named her daughter Hope, the word echoing the transformation of her darkest night into a chance for a new beginning. The scene was so poignant that even hardened officers, used to life's worst tragedies, were seen wiping away tears. Over the next 24 hours, the news broke publicly. A major human trafficking ring had been dismantled, with numerous arrests and rescues across the region. The headlines blazed with words like heroic rescue and modern-day slavery ring. Locals who had once believed their small town immune to such horrors were stunned. Many realized they had unknowingly brushed shoulders with criminals or victims at grocery stores, gas stations, or even in hospital corridors. Lucas found himself caught in a whirlwind of relief, guilt, and a renewed sense of purpose. He visited Emma often, bringing homework assignments she was far from ready to tackle, but which provided a sense of normalcy. On the fourth day of her hospital stay, she gathered enough strength to speak about what had happened. "It started when I got involved with some online group," she said, staring at the hospital ceiling. "They promised a quick way out of this town, a chance to see the world, get money for school. I was depressed, feeling stuck. I thought it was my only shot. Then it all spiraled. The next thing I knew, I was trapped, not even sure where I was." Tears slid down her cheeks. "I'm so sorry I never told you or asked for help." Lucas squeezed her hand. "You've got nothing to apologize for. I'm the one who should have been more attentive." She shook her head weakly. "We were just kids in a messed up situation." The conversation ended with a fragile sense of peace. At least the truth was out, and the monstrous network that ensnared Emma was finally being dismantled. Meanwhile, Detective Martinez grappled with the largest case of her career. The raids had been a success, but the ring was extensive, and more arrests were imminent. Debriefings piled up. Federal agents swarmed the station, combing through evidence that linked the ringleaders to money laundering, forgery, and even organized crime syndicates overseas. The baby Lucas found had inadvertently blown the lid off an operation that might otherwise have continued unseen for years. One night, exhausted but unable to sleep, Martinez found herself staring at a corkboard in her makeshift command center. Photos of recovered women, addresses of raided facilities, snapshots of confiscated medical gear. All of it formed a jigsaw puzzle of a criminal empire. In the center was a picture of baby Doe, now named Hope, her wide eyes brimming with innocence. Next to it was Emma's high school photo. Martinez felt a swell of pride and sorrow. These two symbolized the darkest depths of the case and the fragile hope for redemption. Not every story ended well. Some captives had endured irreversible physical or emotional harm. A few traffickers escaped the dragnet, scattering across state lines. Yet, for once, the good guys won a substantial victory. For Martinez, that would have to be enough for the moment. Outside the police station, a crowd of reporters clamored for statements. Martinez gave a brief press conference, urging continued vigilance and support for trafficking survivors. She praised the bravery of the victims who came forward, the cooperation of federal and local authorities, and yes, even the civic responsibility of a young man named Lucas Henderson, who had the heart to stop for a crying baby on a foggy October night. Lucas saw the press conference on the local news while seated in Emma's hospital room. She looked over at him, a small spark of humor in her eyes. "You're famous," she teased, voice still scratchy. He shrugged, blushing. "I just did what anyone decent would do. You would have done the same." Emma's smile faded as her thoughts drifted. "Maybe," she whispered, "but you actually did it." The raw gratitude in her gaze undid him. He gently placed a hand over hers, feeling the weight of all they'd been through in those simple words. Detective Martinez's voice on the TV droned on in the background, explaining that the ring's leaders were in custody and that the rescued women, including Emma, would get the support they needed. Lucas suddenly felt a lump in his throat. Everything had changed in just a matter of weeks. The baby, Emma's reappearance, the shattered illusions about his peaceful hometown. It was a lot to process. But there was also a flicker of something else, a sense of purpose. If he could help this much by simply caring and paying attention, what else could he do to make the world better? He looked at Emma, who, despite her frail condition, managed a look of determination, as though she, too, was reflecting on a new course for her life. And in that quiet moment, with the hum of hospital machines in the background, Lucas realized that while this crisis had reached a breaking point, it was far from over. Healing would take time for Emma, for Alicia and Hope, for all the survivors. But they'd taken a giant leap forward, thanks to one baby left on a lonely road. The days following the raids brought a mixture of relief, legal proceedings, and a slow process of rebuilding. Millbrook General Hospital found itself at the center of a media storm, both for the stolen supplies and the role it played unwittingly in fueling the illegal clinics. Hospital administrators launched an overhaul of security measures, eager to restore trust. Donations poured in for the survivors, many of whom needed extensive medical and psychological support. In the pediatric ward, Alicia was officially reunited with her daughter, now formally named Hope. Local volunteers provided clothing, formula, and diapers, and hospital staff worked tirelessly to help Alicia file the necessary paperwork to protect her from any further threats. Watching Alicia hold Hope in her arms was a ray of light in a story clouded by darkness. Emma's recovery was more complicated. Physically, she was regaining strength day by day, but emotionally, the scars ran deep. She suffered panic attacks and nightmares about the facility. The staff recommended trauma counseling. Lucas stayed by her side as often as he could, quietly offering comfort. Sometimes they just sit in silence, the unspoken bond between them more comforting than any conversation. One afternoon, Emma confided in Lucas about the worst parts of her captivity. The relentless fear, the manipulative staff who oscillated between forced kindness and cruelty, the times she considered ending her life just to escape. Lucas listened, heart aching, as she sobbed into his shoulder. When she was spent, he wrapped his arms around her, promising she was safe now, that she had a future. Meanwhile, Detective Martinez navigated a whirlwind of legal tasks. She coordinated with federal prosecutors to build airtight cases against the arrested traffickers. Each piece of evidence, emails, ledgers, false medical records, brought them one step closer to locking these criminals away for good. Yet, she knew the operation's leaders likely had more layers of protection. The fight wasn't over, but at least they had momentum. Martinez also found herself grappling with an emotional toll. She'd chosen law enforcement to protect people, but witnessing the extent of human cruelty always took a piece of her. A therapist friend once told her that empathy could be a detective's greatest strength and weakness. Now she understood that more than ever. But she pressed on, knowing the survivors deserved nothing less than her full dedication. During this time, Lucas started a conversation with his mother about doing more for the survivors. He learned that many trafficking survivors needed community support, housing, job placement, counseling, and a sympathetic ear. Moved by this realization, Lucas began talking to local churches, community centers, and even his school about organizing a support group for families affected by trafficking and missing persons cases. His initiative gained traction faster than he expected. Parents remembered the panic of Emma's disappearance, and newscasts about Alicia's plight struck a chord. Before he knew it, Lucas was at the helm of small community meetings at the local library, where families came to share stories, trade advice, and lean on each other for emotional support. Though he felt unprepared for such a role, the group's gratitude buoyed him. Even the mayor stopped by one night, praising the effort. Emma attended a few meetings after she was released from the hospital, quietly listening. She wasn't ready to share her full story yet, but the sense of belonging comforted her. One evening, she leaned over to Lucas and whispered, "I want to help people like me someday, people who feel trapped. Maybe I can volunteer once I'm stronger." Lucas squeezed her hand, beaming with pride. "You already are helping just by showing up. You're proof that there's hope on the other side." Over at Annie's diner, life resumed its small-town rhythm, albeit with a new undercurrent of awareness. Regular customers greeted Lucas with respect, no longer seeing him as just the kid who worked the late shift, but as someone who made a difference. Late at night, when business was slow, he'd often find himself reflecting on how much he'd changed. A month ago, he was a high school student feeling aimless, scraping together tips for college. Now, he was forging a path of empathy and activism he'd never imagined. Detective Martinez, too, felt her perspective shift. She'd long been a dedicated officer, but this case made it intensely personal. She formed friendships with some of the survivors and spent time visiting them, going beyond her usual professional boundaries because she felt it mattered. In one of these visits, she met Alicia and baby Hope again. Alicia pressed a small homemade bracelet into Martinez's hand, saying it was a token of thanks. Moved, Martinez wore it on her wrist, a daily reminder of why she did what she did. Emma's parents, stunned but overjoyed to have their daughter back, faced the delicate task of supporting her through trauma. They made mistakes, overprotecting her one moment, shutting down in tears the next. Family therapy helped them navigate the roller coaster, and Emma grew closer to them than she'd ever been before. She learned that love wasn't always perfect, but it was real, and it was there for her if she let it in. In the broader community, news of the trafficking ring's takedown sparked a dialogue on how such darkness could thrive unnoticed. Local charities began coordinating efforts to educate residents about the warning signs of trafficking and exploitation. Seminars were organized at schools and churches, urging people to look out for red flags, to speak up if they saw something suspicious. A shared sense of responsibility emerged, knitting the town together. Yet, healing was not a linear journey. On some nights, Emma would wake in a cold sweat, images of the clinic's harsh lights and cold corridors haunting her. Alicia, too, struggled with flashbacks, holding hope tightly whenever panic struck. Lucas sometimes felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of the pain he witnessed. Detective Martinez had nightmares about the ones they couldn't save, the victims still out there. But day by day, step by step, they moved forward. The bonds forged in tragedy became anchors for hope. Over coffee and late-night phone calls, Martinez and Lucas sometimes compared notes, sharing updates on the survivors. The detective teased him that he might make a good officer someday. He only smiled, unsure of his future path, but certain that empathy would guide him wherever he ended up. One evening, Emma joined Lucas on a short walk through the neighborhood. The air was crisp, leaves rattling in the gutters. She paused by Winchester Road, where he'd found the baby. Her eyes brimmed with tears. "So much happened here," she murmured, her voice trembling. "It's like every bad thing and every good thing started on this stretch of asphalt." Lucas placed an arm around her shoulders. "I know, but look at all that's changed since then," he said softly. "Hope is safe, you're back home, and we're fighting for a better world." She leaned into him, nodding. The distant hum of traffic was the only sound for a while, both of them absorbing the moment. They knew the road to recovery was still long, for Emma, for Alicia, for the countless others rescued from the ring. But they also knew they weren't alone. And in a world where it was easy to feel helpless, that realization was everything. 3 months later, the crisp winter air had settled over Millbrook. The landscape was dusted with snow, a fitting backdrop for the sense of renewed hope that had taken root in the community. The trial against the trafficking ring's key members was underway, bolstered by mountains of evidence and testimonies from survivors. Though the legal process was grueling, everyone involved felt a measure of vindication in seeing justice pursued so rigorously. Lucas was no longer just a high school kid working at the diner. He'd grown into an advocate, balancing his last semester of school with regular volunteer work. The support group he'd begun continued to thrive, meeting weekly at the local community center. Attendance varied. Some nights just a handful of people, other nights a crowd of more than 30. Regardless, each gathering underscored the same message: no one fights alone. Emma continued her slow but steady journey toward healing. She participated in therapy sessions, sometimes alone, sometimes with her parents. She also started volunteering at a shelter for runaway teens, sharing her story in carefully measured portions to help others see the dangers that lurked in false promises. Although she still battled nightmares, each day she reclaimed a bit of the life that had been stolen from her. Alicia and baby Hope had found a place in a quiet neighborhood through the assistance of a local charity. The community showered them with warmth, gifts, babysitting offers, and even job leads for Alicia. Her gratitude was boundless, and while she often wrestled with the trauma of her captivity, holding Hope's tiny hand reminded her why she had fought so hard to survive. Detective Martinez, newly promoted after her pivotal role in the case, stayed in touch with all of them. On one chilly Saturday afternoon, she arrived at the community center for a special gathering. The local radio station had broadcast an invitation, a community forum to discuss the ongoing fight against human trafficking and to celebrate the resilience of survivors. Martinez walked inside to find a surprisingly large crowd. Some were survivors from the raid, others were families who'd once had missing loved ones, and still more were concerned citizens who simply wanted to learn. The hum of chatter filled the air, creating a sense of solidarity that transcended differences. At the front of the room stood Lucas, fiddling with the microphone. His nerves were evident, but there was a newfound confidence in his eyes. Next to him, Emma sat in a chair, her posture straighter than before, a subtle smile on her lips. Nearby, Alicia cradled Hope, who was now cooing happily, oblivious to the attention. When the time came, Lucas cleared his throat. "Thank you, everyone, for coming. A few months ago, I was just a kid driving home from a shift at the diner. I never imagined I'd find a baby on the side of Winchester Road, or that it would lead to uncovering something so terrible. But it wasn't just me. The police, the FBI, volunteers, survivors themselves. Everyone came together to make this happen." He paused, voice thick with emotion. "I want to thank Detective Martinez for never giving up on this case. And I want to say how proud I am of Emma, who endured so much and still chose to stand here with us today, fighting for others." A polite round of applause broke out, some people wiping away tears. Emma, blushing, leaned over and spoke softly into the mic. "I'm not really a public speaker," she said, "but I felt this was important. If anyone out there is scared, if you think you're trapped, please know you're not alone. There are people who care, and there's a life waiting for you beyond the fear. Her words resonated, a hush falling over the room. Martinez felt a wave of pride for Emma's courage. She stepped forward next. As law enforcement, we do what we can. But this case showed me that the community plays a crucial role. We need your eyes, your empathy, your willingness to stand up for those who can't. She gestured to Alicia and Hope. Sometimes, it's a single act of compassion, like Lucas stopping for a crying baby, that sparks a chain of events capable of uprooting entire criminal networks. We've made progress, but there's more to do. Let's keep looking out for each other. The forum continued for nearly 2 hours, featuring speakers from local nonprofits, survivors who wanted to share their stories, and officials outlining new community resources. It was simultaneously heavy and uplifting. By the end, the collective sense of resolve was palpable. Afterward, the crowd mingled, sipping hot cider provided by volunteers. Lucas found himself talking to a group of younger teens who seemed eager to help but didn't know how. He encouraged them to be watchful, to volunteer, to learn about the warning signs. Emma joined in, surprising everyone with her calm, earnest explanations. In a corner, Alicia gently bounced Hope, who giggled at the swirling activity. Detective Martinez approached them, smiling. "She's grown so much already," Martinez said, reaching out to tickle Hope's tiny feet. Alicia's eyes shimmered with gratitude. "Thank you for reuniting us," she whispered. "I can never repay you." Martinez shook her head. "You and Hope owe me nothing. You both deserve a fresh start. I'm just glad you have it." Alicia glanced around at the bustling community center, the colorful flyers for local support programs, the ring of people offering each other hope. "It's still hard, waking up some days," she admitted. "But then I look at Hope, and I remember that life can change in an instant, even for the better." Nearby, Lucas wrapped up his conversation with the teens and wandered over to Emma, who was gazing at the falling snow through the window. "Ready to go?" he asked gently. She nodded. "Yeah, I think I've had enough excitement for one day." They said their farewells to Detective Martinez and Alicia, then stepped outside. The cold air was bracing, the streets blanketed in fresh snow. As they walked together, Lucas slipped his arm around Emma's shoulders, careful to respect her boundaries while still offering comfort. She leaned her head against him, exhaling a visible puff of breath in the chilly air. "It's crazy," Emma murmured. "Everything that's happened since that night. It's like the whole town changed." Lucas nodded, watching a car pass by, its headlights illuminating the snowflakes swirling in the air. "For the better, I hope." She offered him a gentle smile. "Definitely for the better." They continued in companionable silence, their steps crunching on the snow-covered sidewalk. In the distance, the lights of Millbrook glowed warmly, a testament to the community that had rallied around them. At last, they reached the spot on Winchester Road where Lucas had found the baby, now a place steeped in memory and meaning. Emma paused, staring at the silent stretch of asphalt. "I won't let this define me," she said quietly, her voice resolute. "I won't let them win." Lucas squeezed her hand, nodding. "None of us will. What happened here was awful, but look at how much good came out of it." He gestured back toward the community center, where the glow of lights still danced in the distance. They stood there for a moment longer, acknowledging the pain but also the strength that had emerged in its wake. The future loomed before them, uncertain but full of promise, like an unmarked page waiting for them to write a new story. In that stillness, they embraced, two souls bound by a dark chapter that had ultimately led them, and many others, to a place of healing. The night air was cold, but they felt warm inside, bolstered by the knowledge that even in the face of unimaginable cruelty, compassion could spark a chain of events powerful enough to change an entire community.